Hi everyone, my name's Abul and welcome back to CRTV, powered by City Realtor. Before we start, I want to remind you that this is a brand new channel, so please remember to like and subscribe. In this video, I will be discussing how you can manage your own rental property or portfolio. I won't be going into everything you need to know before renting the property, as I've already done a video on this. If you want to see that video, check the channel and you'll find it there. Instead, this video will be everything that you need to know from that point onwards. So without further ado, let's get started. Once the tenant has moved in and you've sent them all the relevant certificates and guides, the first thing I would do is provide the tenant with two things: who to contact with general issues and who to contact with emergency issues. This could be an email address if you are the landlord and you're just managing one property. However, if you've become a professional landlord and are managing several properties, I suggest setting up a separate email. You will also need to provide a 24-hour emergency line. Again, this could be your mobile number. If you'd prefer not to be contacted between non-working hours, you can outsource this service. The next thing is, and this may be in your contract, but let your tenant know where to transfer the rent money and advise them to put it on a standing order. That way, you don't have to keep reminding them every month when the rent is late. The next thing you want to do is pencil in your diary the end dates for all the certificates with a reminder that prompts you 30 to 60 days before the end date. That way, it gives you enough time to find a contractor to get these things done, as you don't want to be late with these and possibly face fines. Next thing I would do is call around and make relationships with the following types of local tradespeople: a plumber, electricians, a handyman, a locksmith, and a blockage specialist. Because you want to avoid being caught out last minute when an emergency occurs. And then you have to rely on the Realtor pages, or more likely Google, and be charged an arm and a leg. Therefore, if you have an existing relationship, then hopefully you will be charged a decent rate. This is why, as agents, we can source the best local tradespeople for the lowest prices, because we supply them with regular jobs all throughout the year. And as a result, they can afford to discount the price for us. The next thing would be to schedule 2 inspections per year. The first one being in 3 months and then after every 6 months. If you're managing a HMO, then you probably want to inspect more regularly, but that's a whole different video altogether. However, for a single let, and that's what we call a whole property let when it's let out together on one contract, this is probably the best balance. You want to inspect regularly enough to ensure that the property is being looked after, but not too often where you can start looking a bit creepy. The reason the first one is in 3 months is, firstly, allow the tenant enough time to settle in and see if there have been any issues and any problems for them settling in. Don't get me wrong, if after 3 months you find that the property is not well maintained, you can tell the tenant that you'll be back in 3 months to check on it. For example, if the property is suffering from mold build-up, but the tenant tells you that they've never aired the property, then there is an issue there, especially in the UK. And mold build-up is a big issue in the UK, especially now when energy prices are super high. People are reluctant to open windows and cross-ventilate. Likewise, if the property is always well maintained, after the first year, you may not want to inspect every 6 months and maybe do it every year. Now let's talk about the end of the contract. I would ask the tenant at least 2 months before the end of the contract whether they want to renew or not. That way you have enough time to market the property and find a new tenant with as small of a void period as possible. On the topic of voids, and that's the gap between 2 tenancies, I suggest keeping at least 7 days in between to factor in for cleaning, any building works, inventory check-ins and check-outs. ALA, who are the Association of Residential Lettings Agency, actually recommends 2 to 4 weeks, but I'll let you make that decision, as that's a whole month's rent we're talking about. I would say it's probably best to inspect the property 2 to 4 weeks before the end of the tenancy, so that you can figure out what work might be needed in between the tenancies. Here's some other things you need to keep in mind. Leaks. Leaks can happen at any time, whether it be from the flat above or a roof leak. Building insurance usually covers for most leaks. Which actually brings me to my next point. Make sure you have building insurance, because if your tenant accidentally burns your house down, you will just be left with a burnt house. Next, rent guarantee insurance. You may want to consider this. Although you have fully referenced your tenant, anything can happen, and everyone is saying a recession is looming. Be extra vigilant in the winter. In the UK, we always see a hike in boilers freezing up and things of that nature. So you might be planning a nice Christmas break, but then you get that dreaded winter tenant call. So be prepared for it. Lastly, be considerate, but don't be a pushover. It's a bit of a balancing act. I'll give you an example. If there is a sink blockage or a toilet blockage, maybe you get the first one if it's close to the start date. But ask the engineer what caused the blockage. Most of the time, the plumber will actually be able to pull out what actually caused the blockage. And if it's things that shouldn't be in a sink or a toilet, like food or sanitary towels, don't keep paying for that blockage. So those are the main things that you need to consider when managing a property. All of this can be done by a landlord. The question is whether you want to or not. Many landlords, like myself, prefer not to focus their energies on stuff like this. Although I work in this industry, I prefer not to have to deal with the day-to-day issues of my own rental properties and prefer to have dedicated professional property managers deal with it. Therefore, if you would like a quote on property management or any other property related issues, get in touch. I'll leave the details in the description. That's it for now, and see you in the next video.